So, welcome to the Force Multiplier Lab podcast, where we explore what actually happens inside companies where AI meets operational reality. The mess, the breakthroughs, the systems that either hold up or fall apart. Today, we are really excited to be joined by Paul Bennett. He's a 3-time founder, he's a board chair, and a strategic advisor. Paul built and exited companies and now works with founders, executives, and investors across travel, sustainability, and education. His background spans marketing, technology, sales, and strategy, and he currently advises Airbnb on their experiences business. He's also a true outlier, having spent 8 years circumnavigating the globe with his family on a sailboat. In today's conversation, we're going to dig into why so many AI initiatives fall short. We'll talk about how human roles are shifting in an AI native world and what it really takes for organizations to adapt as the pace of execution accelerates. So thanks, Paul, for joining us. I know you're on the other side of the globe. I guess you haven't had dinner yet, but we're really glad that you're able to join us at such a late hour. How's it going?
It's going really well. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to chat with you guys about AI, the good and the bad. I'm in Cape Town, South Africa. So not quite dinner time yet, but I'm also, they say that the fasting helps you, with mental clarity and thinking. So we could sort of attribute it to that as well. But psyched to get into it.
All right. Okay, so you may have heard this before, but 72% of AI projects are failing, according to an article recently in Gartner. In an article in the Harvard Business Review, few companies have been able to fundamentally change their operating and business models around AI. And now even companies like Uber, despite having invested billions in AI, their leadership is starting to see that throwing money at AI without having a disciplined strategy is a recipe for bankruptcy. So, if you think about this, AI is supposed to be the ultimate force multiplier. It's the productivity hack of the ages. What do you think is going on here?
Funny, I actually had a board meeting earlier today, and we were talking about this exact issue. I mean, I think there's sort of two sides to this. On the one hand, part of me feels like it's a nothing burger. We're only a couple of months really into AI ubiquity in the workforce, moving through teams. And, for example, at Airbnb, we're seeing huge AI adoption all through the organization, a real democratization of the tools, and people are embracing them. And it's a messy, early days. People are testing, piloting, building, and a lot of it is garbage. It's never going to kind of, complete that last mile. It's not going to become enterprise software, but it is a moment of experimentation. There's huge amounts of learning and there's huge amounts of transformation. So on the one side, I kind of read those articles like the Gartner, study, and I feel like, ignore it for now. Just let your teams, play with the stuff and learn and invent and build. It's like everybody can become a product manager all of a sudden, and product managers can become engineers. And it's like, it's like that crazy party where they turn off the lights and they turn on the strobe and everyone's wearing crazy outfits. And it's like, wow, what's going to happen next? There's a certain amount of fertility there. But on the other hand, 100%, right? You've got a lot of work slop being produced. You have, tons of projects. It takes a while to build an AI. You think, oh my God, I'm going to just tell my agent to build me a piece of software. And then suddenly you find yourself at the other end of a 35-hour, week where you've just iterated over and over again, frustratingly, in these dialogues with Claude Code to build something that kind of almost doesn't really work. So it's not like you just throw the switch and magic happens. It's a time suck. So that's a resource waste. And then look, token usage is real. You start, firing up LLMs. A couple of months ago, there was a conversation at Airbnb. It's maybe confidential. I probably can't share, but talking about extolling the virtues of token use. Someone was like, "Hey, this person's used more tokens than anybody else. Isn't that great?" Airbnb has $12 billion on its balance sheet, so it can afford to spend a little bit of money on experimentation. But for a small and medium sized firm, that token usage can rack up very very quickly, especially when you scale it across teams. So there are real costs in terms of time and actual expenses, and you couple that with building software, which is essentially what we're doing. And as any software product manager knows, the more upfront planning you put into a project, the better outcome you'll have. And that's just a fundamental fact of physics that's not changing. AI's, incredible, but like there's some gravity here. So I think we are quickly coming to the place, certainly in large corporations, which have a lot more to lose because they're operating at scale. Are coming to the realization that we need to start over investing in the planning, the architecture, the understanding of exactly what it is we're trying to build. Also keeping that sort of, hey, it's party like it's 1999. Let's try, let's just throw a lot of stuff on the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because the expenses, the cost of running this can definitely go into some pretty astronomical numbers. And that's, I think, what we're seeing right now with Uber, right? They're pausing for a minute and saying, oh my God, we already blew through our budget for
Right.
2026. And it's only
Yep.
April. And at the end of the day, we need to make money. We need to build stuff that has a return on investment. And so that's very real. So while you want to give the corporations and your team time to experiment and play around with this and learn and grow and turn it into something, we also have to look at the bottom line.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah, I mean, I mentioned before I was in a board meeting today, and this was for a small company called Sustainable Travel International, and we build tech tools for the travel industry to understand its impact, its carbon impact, plastics, biodiversity, and social impact. And we're building a ton of really fantastic AI-enabled tools. And we have a really exciting one coming out in the next couple of weeks, and the plan is to just make it free. An astute board member was like, great, what does it cost per measurement, on a token usage? And it's a small amount of money, but you multiply it by a large coefficient, and suddenly it's a significant piece of money. The end sort of message was stay close to this, and don't let it get away from you. I think that's what happened at Uber, and it happens very quickly. These costs mount fast.
Paul,
Hey,
what do
can
you
I pick
think
up?
about?
Oh,
Oh,
go
oh,
ahead,
sorry.
Chris. Sorry.
I was gonna ask Paul, what do you think about the, short-term trajectory of how companies, both small and large, should start budgeting, you know, AI allocation and tokens in general, right? Because we see now folks are having to cut down or kind of reintegrate a lot of their budgets into this. What do you foresee in the future? How are companies going to do this?
I mean, I think companies are going to have to reallocate budgets into this. You can't put your head in the sand and not be investing in AI. So you're going to have to make an investment. It's going to have to be a pretty significant one. Chris, the question you ask isn't just a spending a
Hmm.
question of expense. It's also a question of focus and human resource, human
Yeah,
capital.
right.
And I think that kind of just at a high level, every company, small, medium, and large, are going to need to invest heavily in the transformation in front of us. I think it's even more so. Chris, I don't know how old you are, but David and I, we grew up together, and we're more or less the same age. We were there in the '90s for the internet revolution, and the same principles I think applied then as apply now, which is you needed to embrace the internet, and those who didn't fell behind, and many of them went bankrupt. A lot who raced into
Right.
the internet without a plan and spun up things like pets.com lost their shirts. There's a lot of money burned, right? I think I think all those dynamics are present now, except that the tool AI versus internet is 100 times more powerful, and
Right.
it's coming at us 1,000 times faster. So, you know the kind of decision making that you're asking about, like, gosh, how much money should I spend, or how many people should I throw at it? Like, yeah, these are the conversations that need to happen yesterday and need to happen
Mhm.
tomorrow and need to be ongoing. This is classic transformation, change management, and you need to be, if you're a leader in an organization, you need to be on top of this, asking a question of, what are we spending? Who's working? How are they getting transformed? How's their work getting transformed? Is there productivity? And what are we delivering to the market? And how does all that stuff sort of tie together on a very quick timeline, like weeks and months, not years?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I definitely think people have to get on it because, yeah, don't want to be the one, caught waiting. So appreciate that.
You can't deny those sock puppets that pets.com were pretty cool. Hey, so
We should bring
one
them
of the
back.
things that I always say about this, and maybe this is because I've done business operations for decades, but here's where I feel about this. Anything you build, you need to put a business case around it. You need to have some defined success metrics. And I'm not talking about lagging indicators, but leading indicators. So I know along the way, am I on track? Am I going to hit that lagging indicator metric? And just build that whole thing into your operating rhythm so it shows up in how you do work every day. And if you do that, you're much more likely, I think, to have some success and return on this investment, when you're going along that path.
I agree completely. Um, I would love to hear an example of that. Like, what do you think? Like, what does that actually look like for an operational leader? Like, give me a thought experiment, if you can, on.
One of the things that people waste a lot of time in with program management, project management, is connecting with other people, trying to discover what's going on with this program, where are we going off track, where are we on track, and then putting a report together around that. Now, with AI agents, we can comb through Slack channel conversations. We can look at GitHub comments. We can pull together comments in Jira, pull that all together in an automated way and surface any risks, and then push a button and produce a report based on all that inputs and looking at statuses also in Jira, and have that go out in an automated way. That saves a lot of time. That saves a lot of wrangling other people and herding cats. That can be automated. You don't need a person for that. You may need some people to talk about judgment. What do we do with this information, and how do we move the ship in a different direction if necessary? But getting that information together and getting it out to the people who are making decisions, that can be automated. And that's a way to use AI today to kind of shrink that process and the speed to getting that out to people
Yeah.
fast.
Yeah,
That's
getting
my
it out
example.
fast. And also, just to build on that, you could build that system not only to do what we used to do over days and weeks, but like in seconds, but also you could build it and design it to look ahead, right? So mine all that data, all those comments, all that Slack, but then surface insights of where is that team going? Like, what's over the horizon for them, rather than like, what did they do, yesterday?
You could also map it against your strategy. So if you spend some time putting together a roadmap and you have teams working on, doing some other projects that have nothing to do with your roadmap, well, we can look at that, surface it right away, and get the teams working on the projects that we actually committed to for this quarter.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the most transformative things that I've seen lately are where organizations surface their internal data in a kind of democratic way across the entire organization. For example, because we've existed in these sort of data silos. Like if you have a question, you want to know, you know, how has a certain product been performing over the last whatever period of time, and you have to make a request to the RevOps or data, science group or whatever. They have to do a report, and then it comes back, and it takes time. Now, you can build these, shared data oceans, with permissions and whatnot. But, if you get the right permissions, you can just start asking questions of the data internally, and it just unlocks. And that's not that's AI powering human processes. It's not like those people asking questions or building anything. They're not building pilots. They're just asking, they're getting smarter about the organization and its customers or its products. And then that empowers them to make better, decisions.
I have some friends who are in the data world, and this is a little bit of a nightmare because I've worked with organizations that have data in different places that don't talk to each other and they disagree with each other. So if we're looking at the data that we're pulling in and we're trying to make decisions on it, we may have a problem because data hygiene is a real thing. In some cases, you need humans to enter some data. Some data can be automated and brought in an automated way. You don't need somebody there. But once you have it in there, you also need data pipelines that talk to each other, data lakes that communicate, and you get reliable information. Then you can process that and make decisions around it. So this whole data thing is becoming a spaghetti mess that's surfacing, and we've got to address that issue right now.
100%. A little bit of data poorly understood is a terrible weapon.
Hey, I don't want to get off the topic too much, but you mentioned sustainability, and I know that's something that you care about a lot.
Mhm.
Running these AI algorithms, it costs the environment. There's an expense to that. Where do you stand with all this? Because you're a technology person, you're environmental, you're a sustainable person, you're on both sides of this coin here. How do you resolve that in your head?
Yeah, so in that part of my life, sustainability, there's some tension there between no growth people who want to sort of say, look, we need to reduce our energy consumption, um, and others like I guess the group I belong to, who understand that no, we need to grow as economies and as societies to spread wealth around and raise people up. Over the last 50 years, the amount of people that have been brought out of poverty and diseases that have been addressed, et cetera, et cetera. I live in Africa, right? So it's right outside my door. Um, is driven by growth, right? So the question is, and so from that mindset, we consume a ton of energy right now, and tomorrow we're going to consume a magnitude more. We are just an energy hungry species at this point, and AI is just powering it. Um, so we need smart, clean energy. Full stop. It is insane that we burn as much oil that we do. It is insane that we have stopped the world economy because of some small body of water in the Middle East. The writing's been on the wall our whole lifetime for decades that we are headed towards an unsustainable future. And it's not because of our energy consumption. It's because of how we produce that energy. So I'm a maximalist I'm a realist around energy usage. We're going to use a ton of energy, and that's a good thing. But I'm a maximalist on we need to be transitioning to a renewables future. And so that's a lot of what we do at Sustainable Travel is trying to power that transition to a renewables future.
Cool. All right. So, we often talk about AI replacing tasks, but how should leaders be thinking about the evolution of the person in the seat next to you, right? As we move towards more agentic workflow, does the definition of manager change? Do we go from like task driver to orchestrator? So when we look at companies, we are seeing some role shifting that needs to happen. Whether they're happening or not, that's a different conversation, and we should talk about that. But where, what does that look like in practice? When leaders ask their team, hey, work alongside AI, they hit a wall. How do you coach leaders to build a culture where AI is seen as a force multiplier? They're not, but also is not going to replace their jobs. So as we evolve, we need to learn about how to own an outcome and when the machine does the work and that sort of thing. But there needs to be a transformation, I think, in the roles that happen today. But the question is, like, how does that play out in the real world in practice?
I mean, this is the question, right? What is our human future alongside these machines? Obviously, out in society and in life, but more importantly, not more importantly, but it's going to come sooner in the workplace. This is where we're encountering these machines, and they're transforming the way that we work. I mean, I think that there's no easy solution because we're talking about humans and HR. And but I think a big part of it is mindset shift, right? So if I'm a manager, I'm in charge of the culture of my team, the organization, and there are lots of different ways to influence culture. You just used the word an orchestrator or a conductor, rather than a rule maker or a directive
Task
giver.
driver.
And I think that's a task driver, right? I think that that's a really great sort of framing of it, is thinking about that team and how are you going to orchestrate their transformation into tomorrow's team, which is using these machines, using these robots effectively to multiply their productivity, improve their work, and also just make them, give them more fulfilling work lives. I think a big part of it is about being results oriented rather than task oriented. And this has been, I think, a reality for quite a while, really since the advent of OKRs, right? Sort of thinking about what are we driving at as a group rather than how many hours you're sitting at your desk, how many, clicks, that comment about whoever used the most tokens, actually kind of a bullshit comment, right? It doesn't matter who uses the most tokens. It matters how are you using those tokens and to what end? What kind of products are you building? How many customers are you thrilling? And what kind of a team, are you putting together? I think a leader, number one, if I'm running a group, and I am actually, I've got a couple of different groups that I'm connected with or overseeing. The first thing I think about is creating a context and an environment where these tools are available. You're supported in your journey and understanding them. You're free to make mistakes and screw things up. One of my startups is an education business, so we've got kids, right? And one of the ways that you teach kids is you give them something and you let them make a big mistake with it. Go and do an experiment, let the experiment fail, and you've learned from that. And so I think the same is true with a team with AI. Give them some tools, give them some training, say, go out and build. I just want you to build, play, work, burn some tokens, and tell me what you think. And then I think as a leader, you've got to be empathetic and listening. A lot of people, workers, are not enjoying this so far. They're getting frustrated by AI. They're scared of it. They're uncomfortable. You want to create a space where they can voice those concerns and you can really understand, like, where are they on their journey? Some people in a team are sprinting ahead, and that's awesome. Some people are not, and they need some support and nurturing to kind of move them along that path. So kind of training, understanding, listening. But then, at a certain point, you also need to be clear in your team of where we're headed and what our true north is. And, there's some exceptions to this, but probably not that many. Most teams are going to need to be AI first in their workflows as a team. And they're going to need, and every individual worker is going to need to be using this tool, just like email 40 years ago and the internet and all these other tools have kind of rolled along. Everyone's going to need to be comfortable and adept and great at using these tools. And they're going to need to get there faster than they probably think and probably than they're comfortable getting there. And as a manager, it's my job to help them move through that journey with alacrity, but also, at their own comfort, let's say.
Paul, why do you think there's such a huge divergence between Western, understanding of AI versus, the folks in Asia where they're just embracing it left and right? Where do you think that delta happened? Like why are we so scared of AI here in the US, but in China and in Taiwan and Japan, everyone's like, let's just do it. Why do you think that's the case?
Late stage capitalism,
Okay.
right? I mean,
Yep.
it's like it's Rome and it's 425 AD.
Yeah. No, it's fair.
Sorry, but we're just we spend a lot of time navel gazing and
Mhm.
scrolling through TikTok and doing a lot of really silly stuff and not a
Right.
lot of time just building and charging ahead.
Right.
And the silly stuff is important, right? Because we have an advanced economy and a lot of education.
Right.
But yeah, we're not hungry.
Got it.
Talking about the roles, right now, a lot of the roles that were traditionally a part of organization, they don't make sense anymore. You have engineers who are no longer writing code anymore, right? You have operations people who are no longer running workflows anymore. So roles need to evolve where everyone should be directing, prompting, monitoring AI, but they're not because it requires a different skill set. Knowing when to trust the AI output, knowing when to intervene, knowing how to structure an idea into a prompt that produces reliable results at scale, knowing how to own the outcome when the machine did the work. So what's happening right now is, when I talk to people, they're like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do right now because what I have been doing for the past 10 years has completely changed in the past 3 months. And so I need to understand where to go from here. And I think that's a problem.
Percent. Yeah, I mean it's a classic sort of training, learning, education shift, right? What are the skills that I'm going to need tomorrow to use these tools in my team? I have a pattern from yesterday in the past of what it means to be a fill in the blank. That's going to be totally thrown out, and I'm going to have some sort of AI version of this in the future. What does that look like? Um, I mean, look, definitely some positions are going to go away. We're already, seeing that happen. Lots of clerical work that can be done by agents is no longer needs to be done, and so that's where you have a job that maybe 90% of that job is disappearing. But I think most of the jobs in the professional sphere are just going to transform. Computer scientists and engineers a great example. Engineers, there's been all this ink spilled about how like we don't need engineers any longer because we have AI and they can code so well. And yes, they can code so well, but God, an engineer's expertise of understanding, having decades of being in the code and understanding how code hygiene, how to understand the outputs, the prompts, the architecture is super, super valuable. What a lot of engineers lack, just to kind of drill in on that one role as an example, but I think this is true everywhere. There's generally a deficit among engineers of the ability to communicate out, teach, sort of scale their skills out to lots of other people. A lot of engineers work in a silo. They build a piece of their microservice. They ship it to a team. Da, da, da. GitHub takes care of it all, and it's I's are dotted and T's are crossed. They don't have to do a lot of mentoring and development of an entire team. I think that's got to shift. We need engineers in the room with teams that are learning how to build stuff, build workflows, software, whatever it is, who can say, hey guys, here's a key question we need to ask of this code, or here's a bit of skepticism, or here's a piece of architecture wisdom, or here's a whatever. So they've got to be there working collaboratively with an interdisciplinary group of people. And it's not a thing that engineers generally and engineering teams have been structured to do in the past. But they're definitely going to have to tomorrow. And I think that's a principle, actually, now that I reflect on it, it probably applies across the entire organization. We're going to need to become a lot more interdisciplinary, a lot less siloed, and a lot more cross-functional, just generally as organizations, so that we all learn and cross-critique the robots that are serving us.
Yeah, David and I were just talking about this yesterday regarding there's an article that was released regarding how Amazon laid off 16,000 people, and then a few weeks later they ran into the issue where their entire systems went kaput, and they call it dark code, right? It's basically AI generated code that passes through
Mhm.
their automated tests, but there's no human output or input into it. And so they don't know what AI wrote. They don't even know where the bug is, right? And so I think to your point, having that human interaction, Dave and I call it like the comprehension gate, having a human check, right, and output is really critical. And I think you kind of nailed it, right? We need that social interaction and that layer going forward. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's a team. I mean, we call these organizations teams, right? And, if you just think about how a team works, basketball is a great example because all five players have a different role, and they're in constant dynamic interaction with one another. And that we're going to just need more of that and less of the like solo. I do my thing, I check in, I check out, I do my clerical work, tick, 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 tick. And there's a system that sort of like guides it forward. Those days are over. And that's going to be painful for organizations and people for sure. But I love this term of a comprehension gate. That's gold.
I was talking to a founder yesterday, and he is working on a product, putting together a proof of concept. He worked with some junior developers, and they used AI to produce code, like 3,000 lines of code. And, in the past, you would produce code, you would put it into GitHub, you would submit a pull request, somebody would review the pull request, double check it before anything goes out. He's like, I don't even know what to do with this. I can't go through 3,000 lines of code. I don't even know if he built what I asked him to build. So he's like, I'm throwing it away. I'm going to start over. You have examples of like the GitHub Copilot credential exposure that's actually still ongoing right now, where we're moving so fast and we're skipping steps and we're not reviewing code. So what happens? Hard-coded credentials go out into production. API keys are released and they're still being used, and that costs money. And then insecure patterns pulled from training data. This is happening because you didn't have a human intervene or make a judgment call or know when to trust the AI. So humans still need to play a role, just a different role. And I think that's what we're doing. We're trying to define that part.
Yeah. I mean, the role that humans play, traditionally is within a system that's set up with checks and balances and controls to make sure that environment variables aren't, in the code base and other, there are best practices and rules that need to be followed. And definitely we're making a huge mistake if we think that Claude or whatever, has those rules baked in and will follow them all the time. That's just not the case. You need to interrogate code that's made by AI, and make sure that those best practices have been applied. And sometimes that interrogation is as simple as just simply asking the question, "Hey, did you hack the variables? Did you put the variables in code or is it on the server? But you need someone to know to ask those questions, and those are the engineers, right? Who have that system. So those systems need to persist and they need to get a lot stronger, and we need to have them embedded in this new way of working with AI. 100%. Yeah. It's not
Yeah,
cut and
we've got
dry.
your back, engineers. We've got your back. Hey, let me
Yeah.
shift gears here because we're just looking at the clock. We did start talking a little bit about this learning component, right? So traditional corporate training, it relies on teaching a set of process that employees repeat for years. Now we're in an environment where technology shifts every couple days or every week or whatever. How do you build organizations that have a culture centered on continuous unlearning and adaptation? And if technical skills are becoming commoditized and automated, should founders and leaders stop hiring for specific platform experience and start hiring purely for problem solving framework and curiosity? I mean, this whole learning part and education part, I think, is worth kind of digging into a little bit. What do you think about that? Because you have the education background.
100%. Yeah. So quick answer is that leaders need to hire a lot more liberal arts, humanities majors, and a lot fewer business degrees. Um, we have an education system that has really been divided between like technical degrees and old fashioned kind of liberal arts degrees. And we've, over the last 30 years, we've over indexed towards the former and we've sort of denigrated the latter. And I think we're going to see in the next couple of months and year for sure, that those liberal arts thinkers, the people who can step out and be critical and think about systems and processes, and also who can shift and learn. I mean, one of the things that liberal arts teaches you is just how to learn. You can go in and read a book and figure it out. You can, learn how to figure stuff out. We're going to need a workforce of people who are comfortable with on the unknown, who are willing to kind of pick up the tools and say, I'm going to figure this out and I'm going to scrappily, build it. In terms of like a training regimen, I think the training regimen should be built on that idea, right? So like instead of having a specific process that you've built and you train, the worker to do, click this, click that, click this, stepping back and teaching general skills about curiosity, using tools, product thinking, design thinking, sort of higher orders of thinking and learning, and less of the like detailed clerical. Like Claude's got that stuff. Claude can execute your workflow. You need a worker who can build a workflow, and that can build a workflow that's like in concert with other workflows. Again, being able to work in a team, being able to think across disciplines, being able to see the big picture, being results oriented and driven. These are the skills that the human brings to it. And we need to kind of forget about the like, yes, boss, I can click this and I can, dot that and I can make this copy. That stuff is yesterday's work.
So what you're saying, I think, is that corporate training should shift to start training for those types of skills, those higher level skills, to be able to help build that workflow from the start and think
Yeah,
along
corporate
those
trainers
higher levels.
need to rock up to a training session with the great works of Plato, and basically everyone just should sit around and read the Philebus and figure out how the mind works. No, I'm kidding, of course, but yeah, I think corporate trainers need to up their game and need to teach kind of these umbrella skills of curiosity, rigor, process thinking, and less about, oh, we've got a blueprint from corporate and we're going to just teach everybody how to like make the widget.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that Dave and I are trying to tell folks with Force Multiplier Lab is that social interaction is going to be very critical going forward, right? The ability for you to critically think and talk and emulate what you say is going to be more important than anything else. Because I think AI, like you said, can do a lot of the underlying, like tedious work and jobs. But when it comes to actually critically thinking and doing strategic planning and naturally prompting your AI, like that's going to be a skill set that I think a lot of people are going to need. So, in the defense of Aristotle and Pluto, I think a lot of folks need to actually read those because I think that's something that a lot of people are now missing. This, like what you said, I think people kind of skew too much towards computer science and forget that natural language is just as critically important if we want to continue to remain relevant in this day and age.
Yeah. I mean, the most relevant pieces of CS are the systems thinking part, right? Like, can you sort of imagine from end to end how a system works, the design thinking there, which is a course in CS majors that you take along the way, but it's just one piece of a whole set of skills, much of which is quite technical down into the like language, programming languages and da da da. That stuff is
Yeah.
is going to need to kind of go away a little bit, and there's going to be need to be a lot more work on data architecture, systems thinking, process building, product management. I mean, we all need to basically become product managers to some degree, or at least have that kind of thinking. Like, how do I build a thing, whether it's a piece of software or a process that will delight users and lead to result X? And that's a hard thing to do, and it's not overly technical. It's quite creative. It's quite collaborative. It often happens in a team.
Yeah, when I think about like some of the developers that I really admire from the past, what I used to admire about them is how they could take a requirement, a PRD or something, and translate it into a viable product in the most efficient and like clever and smart way. That doesn't need to happen anymore because they can have AI kind of do that part of it. Um, but more kind of thinking about from the orchestration perspective now.
Although, push back a
Hey, so
little
we
bit on
are
that.
pretty much. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I just want
We're
to
breaking up
push
a little
back
bit.
on that. Yeah, we have a little bit of a delay here. Um, I just wanted to push back a little bit on that. I know we're sort of over indexing on engineers here, but I do think that clever solution thinking that the best engineers have is still going to be quite valuable, right? Because when you create a great PRD and you give it to Claude, it does that thinking. It comes up with a solution, and sometimes it is an amazing solution, but not always. And you do need to interrogate that plan that the AI has. And that's where that super clever, creative engineer is really valuable to kind of do a double check on that comprehension gate that Chris mentioned before, do a little bit
Mhm.
of that work and apply that skill to that specific use case. Really, really valuable. I think that'll be um, something of value coming down the pike.
Yeah, no, that's true. And I guess I contradicted myself because said earlier, one of the skill sets that we need to develop now is knowing when to trust the AI output. So that's a judgment. And also knowing when to intervene. That's another skill set that needs to happen. And that kind of plays into what you just said. Absolutely. Hey, look, we are basically at time, so just kind of want to wrap it up. First of all, thank you. I would love to do this again. Actually, there's just so much we could talk about, um, but we do need to wrap it up. Any kind of ultimate kind of takeaways you would want to share with people who are watching this, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the most important things right now is to just not be scared of it, right? I think there's still a lot of hesitancy. Um, Sometimes that hesitancy is around, or hesitation rather, comes from just not knowing where to start, right? Like, God, how do I get into this? What should I know? How should I be using AI in my role? One great sort of resource for that is AI itself, right? Just ask a question to AI. Say, hey, this is my role right now in my job. What are the 2 or 3 skills that I should develop today to do my job tomorrow? Help me sort of think through that and just be a thought partner. Sometimes those conversations with an LLM are super fun, and you get like lots of ideas. Half of it's crap and you're not going to follow it, but you'll get some interesting other ways of approaching the problem and thinking about it, and you'll come away from it, I think, empowered because you've just had a great interaction and you have some new ideas, but also probably some tactical things that you can do to onboard these like tomorrow skills that we're talking about, and sort of future proof yourself in your role or yourself in your next role, whatever it is. Um, that would be kind of, if I was, and I actually do, I've got kids, David, just like you, same age. And so I'm giving them advice, they're in their early 20s, giving them advice about their careers all the time. And that's one of the things I tell them is you need to be sort of AI first in your work when you get your first job.
Well said. Well said.
Great. Well, I think there's a lot of great insights that came out of this. I hope people, get something from this experience and listening to Paul. Thank you, Paul, for joining us and spending time with us. And now I guess you can go have your dinner.
Thanks a lot. This was really great, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Paul. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Cheers, Chris.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that wraps it up for today's podcast session. We hope you guys enjoyed this session with Paul Bennett. Once again, 3-time founder, board chair, strategic advisor to Airbnb. His business acumen is super strong across marketing, technologies, and sale. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like it, feel free to subscribe and like. Follow us at Force Multiplier Labs, and catch you on the next one. Peace.